now it turns to Jodie Morrow to introduce the argument for the opposition in tonight's debate. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, I was struggling with the camera there. Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks to all the speakers who are here tonight. I'm absolutely starstruck to be speaking with everyone tonight. So just give me a minute to settle myself because I'm really excited. This has been an issue really close to my heart for forever. I've done about abortion in my A-level art projects. I've studied it to debate on it in previous situations. I actually went to school in Banbridge, where I know Carla is a representative. So this is a really interesting debate to be had. So I'd like to introduce myself before I start, because I know I'm not as well known as all the speakers here tonight. So I'm 19 years old, and the first time that I heard abortion being discussed was actually in Banbridge Academy when we debated it in religious studies. At that point, I was arguing against it from a Christian standpoint. I believed it was only acceptable in cases of rape, incest, and fetal abnormality, which is exactly what my mum believes. And that's because that was my only exposure to the subject back then. So it's crucial we have these debates because we need to open ourselves up to all the different circumstances. So Ben was talking about the PTSD caused by abortions. So whenever we're talking about the cases of rape, I think it's important to highlight that 75% of rape victims experience PTSD anyway. So to try and say that the abortion is what caused the PTSD would be questionable at best. I think it's important to talk about the science of it. He's very right. So I'm going to bring up the World Health Organization, who gave out the statistics saying that highly restrictive abortion laws are not associated with lower abortion rates. So as the motion is the decriminalisation of abortion in Northern Ireland, we have to look at the legality. We have to look at the practical implications of legalisation versus criminalisation. So regardless of if we believe that abortion is morally right, morally just, if the baby's alive, whatever, these are not relevant to talking about decriminalising it. Whenever abortion is more restrictive, the World Health Organization found that that abortion was more common and typically more unsafe. So across the world, sorry.
On that point,
go for it.
So I take your point in here about, I guess, to go into the idea of backstreet abortions, but there was a pro-choice scientist called Briggs, I forget her first name, and she did what you call the turn-away study, which was basically women who were refused abortion in restrictive abortion states, and she found that almost all the women in that study kept their baby rather than looking to a backstreet termination. So what say you to that?
I say that it's quite sad that women were stripped of their choice in that situation. I think that means that those women could have been put into even greater hardships, and I think that it's disgusting to think that them not having a choice is the right way to go. I don't think any woman should be forced into carrying a baby full term. The truth of the matter is that 121 million pregnancies every year are unwanted, and 6 out of 10 of all of these pregnancies end in abortion. Despite what Ben has just said, I believe that whenever a woman wants an abortion, it's generally her mind is set on it because it is always a last resort. Abortion is not something that any woman wants to use as a contraceptive. There's this narrative that women will abuse it and will use it as if we're lazy and we're just going to start having sex and getting pregnant and just going and getting abortion. That's so not true. You know, in Northern Ireland, we have access to contraceptives, we have access to protection. Unfortunately, in Northern Ireland, people in my generation have still been brought up with an abstinence-only sex education, not in my school, but I have spoken to people in particularly religious areas where their sex education was entirely limited to just waiting till marriage, which we all know is entirely associated with increased unwanted pregnancies. So Northern Ireland, unfortunately, is always about 30 years behind everything else, and it's not surprising that our government failed to actually implement the laws itself. I don't believe we should regret the decriminalisation of abortion. I believe we should regret that our government were not the ones to step up and fight for women's rights. I think it's a disgrace that our government put their petty feuds, as always, in front of everything that their people were fighting for. But when we look at it, Westminster stepped in for a reason. They stepped in because it has been found that access to abortion is a basic human right to women. You can argue that some people believe that we should fight for the basic human rights of a child. However, I believe we need to fight for those who are born. And once, unfortunately, our world is not perfect, and there are still many difficult circumstances which lead to women seeking abortions. And until we have created a safer world where abortion is not as frequently used, where we seek out every alternative first, then we have to focus on the woman first before the child. To me, the woman is always the first priority. That's just my view on it. The thing about the motion being about Northern Ireland specifically as well, I think we have to talk about Northern Ireland specific cases. So we're a very small country. We all know each other. So everyone knows somebody who knows someone who's had an abortion, who has sought an abortion, who's had a mysterious trip to England. We all know these people. My family, we're very close with Sarah Yurt's family. I went on holidays with her granda, who helped her go over to England to get an abortion for her pregnancy. She was late-term abortion because of fetal abnormality. The skull hadn't formed properly. She wanted a child. Not all pregnancies that end in abortion were unwanted pregnancies, and we have to remember this typical woman who wants an abortion, this whole narrative of women who just are careless and didn't think about everything and have ended up in a situation they don't want to be in. It's not always true. These women sometimes want a child. They may want a child, but not right now. You know, these women are not just innately not maternal. So on that point, I think we need to focus on the women being capable of making decisions for their own bodies, for knowing what their situation is best suited to. We could go through every individual case. You can look at every woman who regretted an abortion and every woman who thought it was the best thing that they could have possibly done in that situation. We can go through every woman who was happy they got 2 minutes with their child and every woman who was traumatized by having to carry a child with a fatal abnormality. We can go through every child who was stripped of their, or every woman who was stripped of their child in Ireland during the the laundries. And we can go through every historical event, and we can go through every present day case. We all have different experiences with abortion. Every woman experiences it differently. Every woman will go through it differently. But what we need to do is, legally, we have to look at this from the perspective of who is best capable of making that decision. Is it someone? No, thanks. I personally believe that every woman and her doctor are the people who are best equipped to make that decision in that situation. Because we can all sit here and we can discuss every different scenario, every little intricacy that's going to vary. However, until we can, we're not all going to be able to agree. So we need to be able to have laws that will accommodate every possible scenario. And all of the statistics, unfortunately, point to restrictive abortion laws only increasing the likelihood of abortions being sought out. So I think it's very important that we don't underestimate the importance of supporting women in access to safe legal abortions, because at the end of the day, it could prevent more deaths, because approximately 13% of all maternal deaths every year are a result of unsafe abortions. So they are still happening. They are still very prevalent, particularly in developing countries. Northern Ireland, thankfully, it's not as common. However, our government did vote against prescribing abortion pills over the phone, even during coronavirus, and preventing them access to pills whenever they're maybe isolating, etc. So unfortunately, I do regret our government's attitude to this issue. We're constantly fighting for this right. Our government is still pushing back. Arlene Foster said that this law change was retroactive, whilst I would argue that constantly fighting against what Northern Ireland wants, because in 2018 we did a poll and 65% of our population believed that we should have decriminalised abortion at the same time as repeal the 8th. So we may not have had a chance to voice our opinion then, and our government might not have been the ones to enact the laws, but we're here tonight to actually voice the sides of both arguments and prove that there are people in support of access to abortion. We can all disagree on the intricacies of the laws, about what weeks we go up to, etc. However, in terms of just decriminalise it or not, decriminalisation is associated with less abortions being sought, with safer abortions, with better mental health, with a more progressive society, with better overall situations for everyone involved. So thank you all for listening. Please, I would urge you to vote for the opposition and not regret the decriminalisation of abortion. This is a progressive move for our society, not a retroactive one. Thanks very much.